it feels like I'm wrapping a present. Lyrics aside for a second, he also talks about a lot of very profound things in his lyrics. But even musically, the composition from the get-go has got me wondering, where are we going to go today? What's up, everybody? It's your girl, Rosalie. Welcome back to the ultimate YouTube channel all about world music, psychology, education, and encouragement. I'm glad you're here. Subscribe. We're going to check out more of Ren's work. He's got Money Game Part 3 coming out in just a few days, and I have not listened to 1 or 2 yet, so that's what I'm going to do today. Don't know what it's about. I'm assuming it's about money. So let's check it out. I'm going to check out the official music video for the first one, and then we're going to look at Part 2 in a separate video. Are you ready? I am. If you haven't yet, check out some of my other reviews of his work. I've been blown away by that guy and the things he puts out. So let's check it out. Here we go. Part 1.
It's a strange time we're living in. War can put fear in. Hierarchy parties, they make us feel inferior.
I'm going to start over. Yo, listening to Ren's music, anytime it's a track that I haven't listened to yet before, it feels like I'm wrapping a present. Because I wonder, what is it going to sound like? Where is he going to take us this time? Because he's just so multifaceted. His songs, even when it comes to the musical arrangement, the composition thereof, it's not just, you can't box it in. You can't just be like, well, it's that genre. It's going to have this vibe. There's such uniqueness to the various tracks. There's such a different flavor. Lyrics aside for a second, he also talks about a lot of very profound things in his lyrics. But even musically, the composition from the get-go has got me wondering, where are we going to go today? And it's awesome. Let me start over.
It's a strange time we're living in. War can put fear in. Hierarchy parties, they make us feel inferior. Greed runs through parliament interiors. Devils walk among us, they fit the criteria. Eerie theory, strive, fearing, weary-minded men when we're clearly living in dictatorships. Nearly blinded by illusions to choose who's fooling who. A ball chained to your shoes on pain. It's a crying shame. The pursuit of our own wealth lights a flame that makes greed a game that lets this whole war burn. As the world turns, the whole world burns. But money was invented for trade. But now those bits of paper twist hearts, make slaves, turns a saint into a sinner, a child into a killer. His finger on the trigger of a money game.
Ooh, okay.
Oh, rain, 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 rain. A storm, it comes our way. And those who rise through distorted lies, poison in the veins. But we like to point the blame. It's easier to blame, but point the mirror at ourselves. We're all part of this old money game. Stop.
Hold up. So many flippin' elements here. Sheesh, there's layer after layer after layer. I love the simplicity of the acoustic guitar, though acoustic guitars to me are not simple. They're a beautiful, beautiful instrument. But just having the acoustic guitar sets the tone. It creates, I feel, an empty canvas. Not coming in with too much instrumentation yet. I don't know where this is going. Not having too many different instruments and chord progressions involved, to me, simplifies and sets the tone for me to be able to focus on his voice, to focus on the lyrics. And it creates this empty canvas where he can paint a picture for us. Not that you can't do that when you have a full track, a full orchestra, and a whole full arrangement, but there's more to process for our minds when there's many instruments involved. There are various emotions that we will feel and experience, right? Soft strings that may create a type of melancholy or drama, drums that come in that create a level of excitement or intensity, right? Emotions will be evoked through different instruments. And here, having the acoustic guitar, the straightforward chord progression, to me, allows to really listen to and focus on and not be distracted by anything else, nor for my emotions to get too swayed by the various elements. It's straightforward, empty canvas. The lyrics. We'll talk about that in a second. Him pointing his gun, his fingers at that person's head sitting in the chair all bound up. We'll talk about all the symbolism here, what it may mean. I will share what I am partaking from it. I'm sure many of you have listened to various reactions. You have heard Ren perhaps talk about it. You've looked up what it means. I'm going to share with you what it means to me. And I haven't looked up information on it because I want to be as objective as possible. And the cinematography here, again, this what looks like an abandoned type of garage factory place, very fitting to some of the music that Ren had put out around that time and part of his work then. So there's that red thread there. A lot of symbolism, a lot of things that you can look for, very artistic. But even the choreography with the person on the chair with the guitar all bound up and tied with the rope around, the noose around their neck. Even the choreography of him moving his head back as if dead after Ren pulled the trigger. Now them swaying parallel as he's talking about pointing the mirror at ourselves. He's moving choreographically. The choreography is that he's moving perfectly in sync with the man on the person on the chair as we're talking about looking in the mirror, like that, calling out that hypocrisy. We're pointing a finger, he's addressing the violence and what that money game does to us. But at the same time, the choreography implies that it's the same thing. We are just as guilty of the thing that we're addressing or calling out. So many good things here. Or even one last thing, his body language as he was walking back and forth. For one, at first coming across like he's the one torturing this person or having bound up this person, but then walking back and forth as if pondering, right? Very great acting, a very great body language here that we would find even in movies, right? Which sometimes that's where he gets some of his inspiration from. Very artistic. Multi-layered, you got masterclass music art, in my opinion.
All part of this old money game. Stop.
And his voice, by the way, the texture, that rasp. Ooh, boy, got so much soul. Oh, snap.
This old money game. Dear Mr. President, it's evident that everyone's a resident of fear when they support these ideas to keep us separate. When they make us believe that everybody is coming to terrorize you in the streets, they say proudly through gritted teeth, it's my right to hate, that's freedom of speech. But when did freedom become a reason to hate? A way to justify a racist slur or insult we make? There's an irony in freedom, cause us in the West, we have pillaged and plundered the murdered like savages, colonized all of the rest. That's called hypocrisy. Preach a certain value that you never keep yourselves. Your country was in flames, you denigrate yourselves in a second. Still you spit your venom, demonizing immigrants when really you're the immigrant, cause all of us are immigrants or descended from immigrants. Irony is imminent. I'll shed the light on immigrants. America was colonized by Britain. Britain, it was colonized by Rome, and also colonized by the Saxons. They were German, by the way. You know how people throw shade upon the Germans because of history's pain, and yet we made the same mistakes all again. Demonized.
Thank you so much. As a German, I appreciate him being so educated and shedding light on true history. Not to belittle the horrors of Germany or any nation in the world, but that must be part of the conversation. We're so quick to categorize and stereotype. See, he's inspiring me now. I'm like I want to like start spinning bars and rhyming and flowing. But I love how educated he is, how his lyrics really shed light on hard topics, but in a very profound way, to the point of educating us in real time. Because we do that. We are hypocrites. We are so quick to point fingers and try to categorize and label and define because it gives us a sense of security. And it also gives us the ability to have a scapegoat and not have to deal with our own wickedness because, well, we can point fingers everywhere else. But when you look at history, there's nothing new under the sun. So not only is his poetry so artistic, he's educating us in real time. And by the way, his cadences, Hakuna ma shizzle drizzle. He is just flowing. The rhythm and the way that he is staying on the beat, he's like breaking out some Buster Rhymes up in here as fast as he's going at some of these points. I'm not even talking about the lyrics yet and some of the bars that he is spitting, but phenomenal. And even the cadence and the rhythm that he's applying here as he's educating us on America being colonized by Britain and written by Rome, and then the Saxons and they're German. The rhythm of the way that he's saying it sounds very teacher-esque. It has this educational, by the way, and this happened and this happened and this happened. And then he starts going off crazy, just flowing super fast. I can't even understand some of it because I have to follow along with the lyrics, but we won't do that right now. I just want to savor this art first of all. Him putting on the gloves to me is, and I would have to double check which came first and which came later, but to me there's this little nod to some of the cinematography and elements we find in Sick sorry, in Sick Boy and Hiren, where you have the apron and the gloves and the pig mask, right? This idea of bringing someone to the slaughter. Here, him implying that he's the one who's about to torture, right? Trying to freak out the person on the chair by beating the floor, rhythmically very fitting to the instrumentation and to the composition, but also creating this idea of I'm coming for you. Let me keep going.
The whole people, Jewish or Muslim, the same and the same. Old situations play on repeat. The same old TV shows repeat. Yeah, we worship the bleak. Our opinions are our own and we follow like sheep. There's no left, there's no right. In the middle we sleep. Rain, 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 rain. A storm it comes our way. And those who rise through distorted lies, poison in the veins. But we'd like to point the blame, 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 blame. It's easier to blame, but point the mirror at ourselves. We're all part of this whole money game.
The elements like him even dropping those gloves on the floor and now heading towards this person on the chair. So many details that really add to the quality of this music video.
Game.
Freaking me out a bit.
This old money game.
Oh, snap. Okay. Wow. Wow. Some of Ren's songs, at least videos like this, they make me uncomfortable, but I don't mean that in the sense of as if he's doing something wrong or as if I'm doing something wrong, but in the sense of they are dealing with humanity and uncomfortable truths. And he's doing it in a very real way. He's not just talking about it. It's not just some generalized comment about the plight of humanity. It's very much like dabbling into the uncomfortable, demonstrating it through his music videos without it being perverted or without him capitalizing on it, right? What I mean by that, for example, is I posted this a long time ago, but there was some TV show for kids or preteens that was demonstrating or allowing these young actors to do things that I didn't agree with, right? Young girls, teenage preteens twerking and doing inappropriate things in videos that was really uncalled for a kids show. And some people claimed that it was for the purpose of shedding light on those things or whatnot, or some type of empowerment. I don't recall the details. And I remember writing a blog post about it because I was processing and I was thinking, we don't beget righteousness from wickedness, right? We can't fight wickedness with wickedness. And this idea of using the objectification of women to empower them and fight objectification, to me, is not only irony, it's hypocrisy, dare I say tragedy, because it causes more destruction. And so there is a way to address difficult things without now causing further distress. We can talk about it, we can shed light on it without creating more entertainment to call out the corruption. So there's a fine line between addressing heavy things without creating further destruction, without creating further perversion, and without being hypocrites and just doing the same thing again, for the sake of a message or empowering. And what I find interesting about this work here is that it talks about some very uncomfortable matters, but to me, it's not coming across as some perverted, reverse psychological way of addressing heavy things, but still capitalizing on it by doing it again. It's more an artistic picture of what is happening in our world. The title alone, Money Game, leaves a lot of interpretation open. We can talk about the economy, we can talk about capitalism versus socialism, and we can talk about different political forms. We can talk about the corruption of money. We can talk about the games that people play when it comes to money. And there are many under that umbrella term. There's different ways to start a conversation just by that title of a song alone. The music video sets the tone, right? An eerie, abandoned garage factory place, the red door, and those elements that create a certain contrast between the off-white dirty walls. This person sitting on a chair, bound up, playing the guitar. One could interpret that as if to entertain, right? He's all bound up by the legs and a noose around his neck. There's another lyric by Ren at some point, I don't recall the song right now, where he speaks about the noose around the neck. So it's interesting how there's these cross references. But this person is tied up all in white. All in white makes me think of, it's for one fitting to what Ren has been doing in his music videos when he was in his music video, Hi Ren and the Sick Boy, right? This certain type of attire, it fits that vibe. But it also makes me think of like a mental institute, right? These stereotypical cliche presentations of people that are mentally ill, that are in an institute, that are perhaps in an all-white gown. Just different ways to interpret that. It could also be seen as something very simple, basic. There's no color, there's no life, there's no pattern, there's no fashion here. It's just very simple, down to the very simple attire here. Feet bound so he can't walk anywhere, around his noose, the noose around his neck, perhaps to imply the impending death, to silence, right? The covering over his head, a form of torture to take away that person's identity, to keep us from seeing who this person really is. Also could create, it also makes me think of, this could be any one of us, right? It's not just a specific person. This could be anyone in the government, in leadership that is playing games, or any one of us who is being played and being bound and who is a slave to these money games. This person playing the guitar, which sets the tone for the track on a musical level, but also it makes me think of entertaining, when you're bound, when you're enslaved to something and you're just here to entertain. Are you entertained, right? Ren in his attire in this raincoat covering, right, as if to imply he's about to torture and butcher this person, right, as to avoid maybe getting his clothes dirty, putting on the gloves, has a very eerie, scary vibe to it that makes me think, okay, he is trying to protect, perhaps from getting the blood on himself, perhaps to avoid leaving fingerprints, right? A crime is being committed here. It also makes me think the way he's walking back and forth, very movie like, great acting, how he is pondering, how he's thinking in the beginning, and then how there's this switch between approaching this person on the chair, about to pour gasoline on them in order to burn him, or about to torture him, about to beat him with the bat, right? Trying to create fear by hitting the ground in a rhythmic way, which also fit the musical composition, but then not bashing his head in, walking away, talking some more. His cadences when he was speaking, like I said earlier, on history and the colonization and this pattern, it's all just the same in purple. There's nothing new under the sun. And then to the point that instead of pouring gasoline on this man bound on the chair, he sits down, he takes off that protective gear, right? He takes off that layer of protection and he pours it on himself, and he sets himself on fire, which is to me implied as he lights the match, and we don't see the rest, because that would have made for way more complex and expensive movie productions, music video productions, I would say. But it's implied that he now lights the match on himself. And to me, that fits with this idea of hypocrisy. We're addressing corruption. We're talking about the times we live in and this world we live in. The world can put fear in you. Hierarchy parties, they make us feel inferior. This is very relevant to our day and age, and it's also not anything new. This is as old as time. Different hierarchies in society between the royals and the common people, different levels of importance and popularity. Then you have our day and age now, right, where there's different hierarchies. You have those who are trying to make a living, just doing their 9 to 5, working to provide for their family. You have people in the government, you have people in high places that make a lot of money, that pull the strings. You have those who are just trying to live paycheck to paycheck and come up with money for groceries and gas to be able to go back to work, to do it again the next day. You have hierarchy when it comes to social media, people with bigger platforms, smaller platforms. We measure people based off of that. We measure people's success. We measure their beauty and their appearance, the way that they present themselves, with the things they say. There's a hierarchy. And it creates a level of inferiority if we compare ourselves. Greed runs through the parliament interior. Devils walk among us. They fit the criteria. And here now, my perception here is that it's more externally focused, talking about the world, the hierarchy, the parliament, right, addressing the politics. Eerie theories strike fear in weary-minded men. And by the way, not only were his cadences and the rhythms of his rap amazing, there was so much dynamic to it. It was really not one way, one lane. There was a lot of dynamics, a lot of crescendo, to the point of him going as fast as all get out. But not only that, but the lyrics are so poetically profound, but also to the point. Eerie theories strike fear in weary-minded men. That wordplay, eerie, theory, and weary, okay? But fear and weary, also fitting, has a similar phonics makeup. But the message of striking fear in weary-minded men, right? These theories that strike fear in weary-minded men. Is this a reference to conspiracy theories? Is this a reference to the people who, even nowadays, we see something on social media and it creates fear? If we are weary, if we are tired, if we're worn out by that overstimulation, by the games, by the manipulation, it creates that fear. We can't stand our ground because we are not of a sound mind. When we're clearly living in dictatorships, nearly blinded by illusions to choose, but who's fooling who? See, again here, the elements of English literary art that this man integrates is mind-blowing. Not only his rhyming, the phonics, the metaphors, the similes, the acronyms, so many different things where he's integrating literary art. That's why I believe people respect him so for his poetry, modern day Shakespeare, because there's just so many. He's a very intelligent person to be able to write like this. But who's fooling who? A ball chained to your shoes, right? Which would work with, in the music video, the feet being chained. We can't move. We're stuck. We're bound to a certain position. We can't break free because of these money games. And I like the fact that not only does he address externally what is going on when it comes to corruption, the dictatorships, the politics, right? The powerful people in high places pulling strings, but also then addressing the fact that we need to look in the mirror, that this goes both ways. And of course, it's a complicated topic. Check out my interview with Ren if you haven't yet, where we talk a little bit more about all kinds of things. It was an awesome conversation. But one of the topics that is hard to find a easy answer for are those economic questions and the political questions, right? Because many different forms of politics, many different forms of social arrangement have pros and cons, right? The idea of sharing things sounds nice, helps those when they're in the time of need. But then there's also a whole lot of problems when you look at a welfare state and you look at human beings. We are human beings and we are complicated. And there are those who really want to be upright, who may use welfare and support from a government as they need for the time being. And then there's those who abuse it and who live off of it, who have no problem with living off of the hard work off the backs of others. So you have a lot of tricky topics when we talk about sociology and anthropology and politics and economics. It's really not black and white. It's not an either or conversation. There are benefits to capitalism and a free market where we can compete with one another and make a name for ourselves. But then there's also downsides when people become so capitalistic and greedy that they dismiss those in need, or you have those working just as hard who have a hard time reaping what they sowed and actually harvesting benefits for their hard work. It's very complicated. There's no easy answer. But the system is corrupt. And there's this idea of being chained, not being able to move, being stagnant, being forced to sit down. It's also interesting in the music video that later on he paints the eyes onto the mask, onto that face covering. To me, it makes me think of an illusion. Eyes are painted on this face, but they're not real eyes. This person is still blind. They still can't see. And though it may look like they have now received vision, they are very much still just as limited as they were before. A lot of it is external. It's a facade. It's painted on, but it's not real. It also makes me think of this idea of mocking, right? There's this idea of I'm mocking you. You can't see. You have your face covered. Instead of removing the mask, I'm just going to paint eyes on it. See, I'm going to assert my power. It's also this idea of manipulation. I have the power to paint those eyes on the mask. I have the power to create a look. You're just as limited and as bound as you were before. There's a lot of psychology here. I'm pained. It's a crying shame. The pursuit of our own wealth lights a flame that makes greed a game, lets the whole world burn. As the world turns, the whole world burns. Money was invented for trade. And then he goes and walks around, right? Kind of like pondering life, almost like a teacher. I think he had his hands behind his back. That body posture was very fitting to what he is trying to communicate. Now, those bits of paper twist hearts, make slaves, turns a saint into a sinner, a child into a killer, his finger on the trigger of a money game. And that's so accurate, right? Money, there is a verse that people like to quote. It says, the love of money is the root of all evil. And sometimes people forget the part that says the love of money, not money is the root of all evil. Money is actually a tool, right? It's just paper at the end of the day. It was made for trade. There was a time when it was coins, and before that it was shells, and before that it was different things that people needed where we exchanged, right? I give you eggs and you give me bread, right? We have always found ways to either share or trade, right? And so money is an illusion in the sense that it's just paper. It's just as valuable as we give it value to. But unfortunately, as the world has grown and as the world turns and keeps burning, we'd go from a place of deciding amongst each other what is of value, right? I'll give you this cup, you give me your shoe. Is that a fair trade? We establish and somehow compromise or come to a agreed upon exchange. Now we're at a point where there is a certain group of people that are in control of that currency that decide how much something is worth, and they will print or not print more or less of it. And now that's affecting the economy, and we have inflation and we have recessions and we have people struggling. Then you have those who work towards wealth, who try to make wise decisions when it comes to investing and purchasing assets versus liabilities to make a name for themselves, to have freedom. Because ultimately money, the goal would be for money to buy us freedom. And it's interesting, I think he also speaks of freedom. At one point, I would have to go back and check that out. I'm not sure. But the goal with money would be that it buys us freedom of our time, that we can go places, that we don't have to show up at work on Monday and be afraid of being fired if we are sick for a while, that we can travel the world or do whatever we want with our time. Time is ultimately our most valuable asset. Money is just a tool. And so there is this game involved where saints turn into sinners. People become corrupt if there's a love of money, when people forget that it's a tool. Rain, 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 a storm, it comes our way. Those who rise through distorted lies, poison in the veins. We like to point the blame. I like the fact that he's now shifting the focus not only from calling out the corruption all around, but also addressing that we need to look in the mirror. Dear Mr. President, it's evident, right? That wordplay again, that everyone's a resident of fear when they support the ideas that keep us separate. When they make us believe that everybody is coming to terrorize you in the streets. They say proudly through gritted teeth, it's my right to hate. That's freedom of speech. That's what I was hearing earlier with the freedom of speech. It's my right to hate, freedom of speech. It's interesting, right? Because that too is such a interesting conversation when it comes to freedom. Freedom of speech would imply we have the freedom to say whatever we want, right? But there is this irony, this paradox, tragedy, if you will, when it comes to now using that same freedom to speak hate and to destroy. Is that really freedom, right? Does freedom really mean I can do all things? Not everything is beneficial, and there have to be consequences. If everything is permissible, people wouldn't end up receiving consequences for their actions. And the same thing goes not only with our actions, right? You can't kill or steal without having to be held accountable. That would not be justice. But it also goes with words. If we can't just do whatever we want without the consequence of ending up in jail or having to pay back what we stole or be held accountable for our actions, shouldn't it be the same with words? But it's this weird dance because while you shouldn't be able to say whatever you want because it can cause destruction as well, there is power in our words, in our tongue. It's not true freedom. Freedom, if we are enslaved to our rage, if we're slaves to our anger, we're not truly free. If I use my freedom of speech to now hate on people or be unkind or say whatever I want, no matter what, because, hey, I got freedom of speech, I'm not really free. I'm a slave to my emotions. I'm a slave to my feelings. And that happens a lot of times nowadays on social media. People just comment, they're reactive, we don't ask questions, and then we want to justify our words with, hey, freedom of speech. When did freedom become a reason to hate? Very true. A way to justify a racial slur or insult that we make. There's an irony in freedom because us in the West, we have pillaged and plundered and murdered like savages, colonized all of the rest. That's called hypocrisy. So he's not only talking about money to me, that's my takeaway, in the sense of the corruption of money and the conversations we can have from there when it comes to capitalism, socialism, communism, and so on and so forth. He's now also talking about that money game when it comes to power and politics, when it comes to conquering, right? It's not just one versus the other. It's not a just black or white issue. As he said, it's as old as time. We can see this all throughout history. If it wasn't the Romans or the Arabs, if it wasn't the Germans, if it wasn't the British conquering, if it wasn't British and the Europeans coming to America, if it wasn't African tribes amongst one another, Native American tribes, it's human beings. We tend to want to have power. And if it wasn't for money and if it's not for actual money, currency, it may be in the name of religion, it may be in the name of power or politics. But it's all a game. And I think summarizing it by saying money game is well put, because a lot of things that were done in the name of religion, that were done in the name of development or conquering other nations, is a money game. Preach a certain value that you'd never keep yourself. If your country was in flames, you'd emigrate yourselves in a second. And that also fitting to what happens in the music video, flames, things going up in flames, but pointing out the hypocrisy, right? If our country was in flames, I actually just said this when in a conversation with a nurse yesterday, if it was us, we would want to migrate to a different nation this quick. If our lives or our children and our families' lives were at stake, we would do what it takes, legal or illegally, because it's a matter of survival. Does that mean that there's no need for some type of regulation? Does that mean that the whole topic of immigration is a simple one? No, not at all. Does that mean that all borders should be put away with and everyone should just come and go freely? That becomes tricky really quick, because when we're talking society, we're talking a nation, we're talking money and economy, it gets messy, because then you have those working paying taxes to now cover welfare and help for those who came illegally who don't, right? It's tricky. It's not just a black and white conversation. To me, the answer also is not just to say, oh, they're all horrible for doing this and not doing that. Here's the solution. And this is where I like that he's pointing out the external issues, but also the internal issues. We're all prone to that corruption if we're not careful. We're all capable of unspeakable things. And he sheds a light on that human nature. And he starts conversations, and I think that's very profound. Conversations and questions that don't have an easy answer, but conversation starters nonetheless. And when it comes to this, immigrants, he says that when you're an immigrant, all of us are immigrants. We descended from immigrants. It's holding the mirror back up and saying, listen, we're pointing fingers here at other immigrants coming into our land, but we are literally the same. We descend from immigrants. And that's very true. But then, of course, The flip side to that is, what's the answer, right? Do we eliminate all borders? Do we just say everybody come and go as you please? That gets tricky. As I mentioned, for economic reasons, for money reasons, that's not the answer either. When it comes to managing a society and keeping the peace, that's tricky because not everybody that comes and goes has a peaceful agenda. They may want to come in to conquer and overpower, but it depends on who and what and how. It's all a game. It's all an exchange. And it's hard to generalize because a lot of it is case by case. And I won't go through all of it, but it talks about history, right? The colonization and the Germans and the Saxons. And he's talking about people throwing shade on the Germans because of history's pain, but we make the same mistake. Great rhyme and wordplay there. Demonize a whole people, Jewish or Muslim, the same and the same. Yep. Rain, 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 a storm it comes our way. Those who rise through distorted lies, poison in the veins. We like to point the blame. It's easier to blame, but point the mirror at ourselves. We're all part of this old money game. Phenomenal song. So many conversation starters here and so much truth. It really is a money game. And I think I'm prone to want to find a solution and have all the answers, but I don't. But I think that a lot of it boils down to every one of us finding ways to choose life in our day-to-day and to do the next right thing and to make right choices in the positions that we've been given and the roles that we've been given. And to ask these questions. This is great ways to start the conversation and to actually have a dialogue. I think that's where it begins. Have a conversation about it. Figure out what we can do to kind of find a balance. And that is often, unfortunately, not done if all we're doing is pointing fingers instead of holding up the mirror. And it's not done if we don't actually assess the game, if we don't actually look at the board and all the players and go, wait a minute, I'm very much part of it. What are we going to do about it? What did you think? Let me know in the comments below. What did I miss? What does this song mean to you? And remember to subscribe and go follow Ren, support him. He's on a great track and I'm happy to check out his work. I'll see you on the next ride. Ayo! Ayo!